what does receiving the Gascon-Thomas Lifetime of Achievement Award mean to you?
It means that some people are watching, some people are seeing, some people are seeing the work and appreciating the work, and I'm especially excited because it's mostly young people who are looking and saying, hey, you did some things. You did some things that are actually impacting who we are today and how we do our work and the kind of landscape that has been built during your time for us to work in, you know, and I love that. I you know, you gotta love any kind of recognition, really, because that's what you do as an artist. You engage others, you know, and this is a great engagement for me, especially at this time where I'm on the brink of saying, hey, I'm retiring. Oh, but artists never retire. But you know, that it means a whole lot to have one's career recognized as impactful and you know, really touching a lot of people, you know, because I felt that I've gotten it at all kinds of individual and you know, organizational levels as well. But to especially have the National Theatre School, a training organization, which has been training being a big part and mentoring and nurturing being a big part of my career, to have that recognized is certainly happy.
Yeah.
It is. It says to me, you are doing well as an artist in the world. I'm walking well in the world. And I love that.
Yeah. Since we're talking a little bit about you're maybe coming up on some retirement, maybe, can you talk a little bit about your early career and what first inspired you to get into theater?
Ooh. I went to university as a biology major, and my first year at York University, you know, I was pretty avid, you know, about being there. And then I started writing poetry. You know, I would get up in the night writing poetry, just writing. I'd be writing poetry in my physics class, you know. And then I started hanging out downtown on the beat poetry circuit, you know, just waiting to get on an open mic and, you know, try my stuff. And, you know, the new year rolled in, I said, you know what, I need to finish my degree. Let me look at how I really want to do this. I wasn't going to be the biology teacher that I thought. I had entered university with that idea in my head. So I said, what can I do that's going to actually work for me right now, allow me to actually make it to classes and do the work. And so I changed faculty, first of all. I changed faculty and I started doing, I changed my major to psychology in the arts faculty. And I had linguistics minor, you know, which for me was perfect because I was really exploring language so much more then, and it gave me a much broader kind of purview to look at what I wanted to do and say with the poetry. And doing that, you know, I continued and finished my degree, I remember one of my first performances that was not strictly a poetry performance was a cultural show at university. That's really my first theater foray. Me and Janet Sayers, we were at York University at the same time. And me and Janet did my poetry, Janet doing music and playing drums. And we said, hey, we're in theater. Janet was actually in a theater student then. I wasn't, and we just started that, and people really liked it. They invited us to the first Black Arts Conference in Montreal. And that was like 1980s, you know. But before that, even, I mean, that year that I didn't do school, I was downtown, not just on the beat, poetry circuit, but I was at rallies.
Yeah.
I was the youngster that my older political cohorts, they would throw up on stage to inspire folks, and I did it willingly, you know. So I like to say I used to throw my my heart and my fist up in the air with my poetry, and I loved it. And I got into theater because the co-artistic director at Black Theatre Canada saw me a couple of times at the rallies, and she said, you know, come on up to Black Theatre Canada, do some work with us. And it just took off from there.
Yeah. And so what nowadays do you think the role theater and art have in today's society is? Like, if it was so connected in the 80s for you, do you think that connection still stands true?
I think it does. I think it does. I think the platforms where we actually do our activism has changed somewhat. You know, there's also a lot more individuality almost, you know, because people are activating on social media quite a bit. You know, there's a lot going on there because I'm not there, but I hear there's a lot going on, especially on individual levels where people are sounding off. And there's a good thing to it, you know, there is good. There's no standards or monitoring, but then, you know, in our real life, in our real world, there isn't really, you know, people do what they want to do and do what they can. But I think it's still here. It's still here. I think maybe we don't see it as much because there's so many different kinds of platforms happening, and it's kind of like, where do I look? Where do I look?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's here.
Yeah. I'm going to shift a little bit towards the idea of like looking ahead. What forms or genres of theater and art do you think like should be showcased more or are a little bit underrepresented still?
I would say what may be considered cultural theater. And by that I mean stories from all kinds and different cultures, especially in a place like Canada where, you know, we kind of spout multiculturalism a bit, but we don't really live it in that arena, in the arena of producing and showcasing in art enough. We don't do that enough, and you know, we have the world at our feet here, and we need to look at what's here. You know, I'm always one to look at what's at our feet and work from there. You know, and I think in Canada we can explore all kinds of stories with all kinds of tongues, and much more, because even though we may not know all the languages, we still can interact and engage and find common spaces and find common and, you know, encouragement of towards how to better all our lives together.
During your time as a teacher at NTS and as a mentor at NTS, what was the most important lesson or perspective that you wanted to share with the students that you were engaging with?
I think I don't think that changes for me depending on the space where I am. It is always the same, because for me, especially with young artists, it's always about finding your voice. What is your voice in this bigger arena of all kinds of art and activism and artists' productions? And so what's your voice in this milieu? Where do you stand? What do you think you know, or what do you want to share? What's coming through you, and how can you really contribute to help make changes, or just to engage, period. You come with a certain perspective, and that perspective is always as good as anyone else's.
What have you learned about creating spaces for diverse voices in the arts, and how has the landscape changed now versus when you first got into it?
What have I learned? Oh, I don't even know if I can assess that. I have learned, well, one of the things is always flexibility and openness. You know, I had to really embed that in my work, period, you know, and flexibility around the kind of resources, flexibility around how you collaborate, flexibility around where you look to whoever's coming and what people are coming with. You know, I've always had to be open around that. Well, I never start from the place of, do I like this?
Right.
I start from the place of, is there substance here? Is there worth? And for me, there's always worth, even if the work itself doesn't seem to sit in a potentially excellent space. I think it needs, always deserve room. You know, there always has to be a spectrum of what is presented. And particularly in like the Rock Paper Sisters Festival, for me, it was always making room in any kind of venue, whether it's a large venue, small venue, making room for all kinds of voices. So for me, when I look at venues, I always look how can the creators and the presenters shine, regardless of what level or what we would call caliber the work is. What's best for them to shine, you know, and I think that for me has been the biggest lesson, you know, making room.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving into the future, the projects that you're exploring and that are coming up for you, what themes or creative avenues are you pursuing?
I am very heavily and strongly into documenting what has gone on. Even my own work, I have several documenting projects of pioneers, of people who are in the biz right now, and people who I see looking towards the future. Documenting that specifically in Black theater across Canada over the years. I am very excited about those projects and my planning and starting to work on those, you know. It speaks about the legacy. It speaks about the legacy of how we've contributed as Black artists in the wider Canadian landscape. And it speaks about the legacy of younger folks knowing what has gone on before them, being able to recognize that, being able to, quote, see the shoulders they stand on, and also see where they can take their own work.
What would you like to leave for the future generations of artists and for the communities that you've worked with?
Well, I think, I'm kind of leaving it already. I like the fact that I have projects that are tangible, like my books and recordings, and, you know, to some degrees productions. But I think the biggest thing is all the artists' lives and all the artists' works that I have touched. And the fact of not only the artists knowing that, but other people knowing about the influence, because for me it's like a movement. You know, it's a movement that has grown since the 80s, you know, with my work. And it's great always to be part of a movement that grows, and a movement that actually makes a difference. And, you know, knowing that my work and my career made a difference in so many lives, that's what I leave.
What advice would you give to young artists in 2025, especially considering the political climate and the challenges we face?
But always be yourself, no matter what space you go into, especially as an artist. Bring your authentic self with all its flaws and maybe open sores and, you know, and your shouting and whatever you come with. Bring that self into the room, no matter how small or how big the room is. Bring yourself into the room, and you will be fulfilling your own mission and the wider mission, just to be a part of everything and be a part of the engagement within the art, whatever kind of art you are embroiled.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me and to answer my questions.
Absolutely.
And congratulations on winning the Lifetime of Achievement Award.
Thank you, and thanks for your cohorts for making that possible, you know, really. I love it. I love it.